Let's talk about the 2025 Met Gala. One of the biggest events of the year is without a doubt the Met Gala, a fundraising benefit that is traditionally held on the first Monday of May at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Established in 1948, it began as a simple dinner to celebrate the Costume Institute's annual exhibit, but as the years have passed, the Met Gala has become a more elaborate affair, turning into a fashion show featuring some of the most recognizable celebrities in the world. This year's exhibit was Superfine, Tailoring Black Style, which was inspired by Monica L. Miller's 2009 book, Slaves to Fashion, Black Dandyism and the Styling of Black Diasporic Identity. Similar to the book, the exhibition focuses on the Black dandy, who used clothing as a way of self-expression, respect, and rebellion. The dandy initially emerged in Europe in the 18th century, with young wealthy men placing an emphasis on being well-groomed and dressed. One of the first black dandies was Julius Soubise, who was brought to London from the Caribbean as a slave. He was eventually freed by the Duchess of Queensberry, who was known to be quite an eccentric, and she treated him as she would her own child, funding his education and social activities. Julius dressed in a stylish manner that would have been the standard for any aristocrat, but because of his race, he was both celebrated and ridiculed for his fashion choices. As the slave trade grew, aristocrats found ways to flaunt their wealth in even more conspicuous ways, dressing their slaves in elaborate fashions that were detached from their cultural heritage, turning them into accessories who had dandyism forced upon them. In the late 1800s, black civil rights activists like Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, and W.E. Du Bois donned Eurocentric fashions like top hats and waistcoats to force people to give them respect. And with this refined clothing being used to directly challenge racism, it evolved from a symbol of compliance to rebellion. During the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, African American cultural expression was on the rise, with art, music, dance, literature, and politics thriving. Fashion was used by the black community as a way of rejecting the limitations that had been placed on them, with men donning sharp suits, bow ties, and fedoras to highlight their elegance and flamboyance. Some women, like Josephine Baker and Gladys Bentley, fashioned themselves in similar suited styles, but more feminine outfits were similarly ostentatious, with fur coats, flower brooches, and beaded embellishments. As the years passed, the style evolved in different ways, like the bold colors and accessories of the 1970s or the luxury sportswear and logomania of the 1990s. As a reinterpretation of contemporary fashion trends that was tied to their cultural identity, the black dandy has been able to repeatedly defy societal, racial, and gendered norms. Like any fancy party, the Met Gala has a dress code, which this year is tailored for you. Although influenced by the exhibit's emphasis on the black dandy, it's more focused on suits and structure. I don't doubt that this dress code was for the sake of the event's non-black guests, who might have had trouble dressing in the style of a black dandy without drifting into appropriation territory. As is always the case when the Met Gala is concerned, some guests do a great job of following the dress code and referencing the theme, while others do the bare minimum. Because black dandyism is rooted in masculine styles, male attendees had a lot more references to pull from than usual. So instead of the sea of boring black suits that we usually get, there were actually some really fun and interesting looks. Some of my favorites included Lewis Hamilton, Shaboozey, Chance the Rapper, Ibrahim Kamara, Jeremy Harris, and Damson Idris. Even though I did like Coleman Domingo's suit, I was a bit disappointed since I've seen him in more eye-catching looks for other red carpets. And since he was one of the event's co-chairs, I feel like there was no better time to pull out all the stops. It's also a shame that Wisdom K wasn't invited this year, because I think he would have absolutely killed it. I had originally thought that Alton Mason's outfit was a reference to Prince or MC Hammer, black artists who were known for their flamboyant style choices, but he later admitted that it was inspired by his favorite anime, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, leaving me a bit conflicted about the look as a whole, but at least it's well constructed. One outfit that took me by surprise was S. Coup's, which combined a Korean hanbok with a classic zoot suit. While it might appear like a total deviation from the theme at first glance, I actually think that there's a good balance. And considering black dandyism was a form of self-expression for the black community, I think this fashion fusion ties into that mindset. A bunch of celebrities wore capes as a reference to Andre Leon Talley, former creative director of Vogue, and one of the most well-known black dandies of the 21st century. Talley's penchant for capes were inspired by aristocratic fashions of prior centuries, donning them in a variety of cuts and colors, and some were even selected to appear in the exhibit itself. While this was a pretty creative way for guests to reference the theme, I do think some did a better job than others by actually integrating it into their outfits in a meaningful way. The biggest influence on women's fashion this year was without a doubt the zoot suit, with pinstripes, padded shoulders, neckties, and high-waisted trousers making frequent appearances on the red carpet. Some people went in a more avant-garde direction, exaggerating the silhouette and heavily accessorizing with top hats, canes, pocket watches, and gloves. Rihanna, Jodie Turner-Smith, Tiana Taylor, Cara Young, Tessa Thompson, and Janelle Monáe all went all out, and it's actually impossible for me to pick one as my absolute favorite. Some people opted for more simple suits to emphasize the tailoring aspect, and while they might not be as ostentatious as what people have come to expect from the Met Gala, I don't think there's anything wrong with showing off nice, clean lines. I mean, just look at what Zendaya wore compared to Anna Sawai. There's just a bit more oomph to it. Doechie's suit was a bit contentious, but I personally like the sort of youthful, boyish quality that it has, and I do think it's interesting how the silhouette is a sort of modern take on 18th century clothing. I just wish they'd taken the logomania just a tiny bit farther, especially since it was a surprisingly rare motif on the red carpet despite its importance in Black fashion. A lot of people opted for skirts or dresses inspired by menswear, and while they weren't necessarily offensive, I did find them pretty boring. Anne Hathaway and Hailey Bieber honestly could have stayed at home. That's how unimpressed I was. But Mindy Kaling, Zoe Saldana, and Zuri Hall more than made up for it. Besides the gowns fitting them like a glove, there were also so many unique details that I could have looked at them for hours. Bodysuits were surprisingly popular this year, but I personally think there were more misses than hits. I did like Doja Cat's Marc Jacobs look, which paid homage to Grace Jones, and the sort of gaudy 1980s direction was a nice change of pace from the more historical-inspired looks. Sabrina Carpenter's outfit looked great, but it's pretty derivative of her usual performance attire, and I find it eerily similar to what Kendall Jenner wore to the 2023 Met Gala, which I also wasn't a fan of. I know that she was told she couldn't wear pants because she's so short, but a truly great tailor would have been able to work with her proportions. Lisa also wore a bodysuit, and it's caused quite the hubbub online. According to Louis Vuitton, the lace was custom made and depicted people found in Henry Taylor's art, but some people think that they put Rosa Parks on her crotch, which, as you can expect, wasn't considered very respectful. I personally can't tell if it's Rosa Parks or just a random woman wearing glasses, but I just didn't think the look as a whole was very imaginative. Honestly, I didn't find any of the outfits the Blackpink girlies wore to be impressive, but if I had to choose one, I guess I'd go with Jennie. It's at least accessorized in a fun way. The worst outfit of the entire night was hands down Amelia Gray in Valentino. The do-rag felt tone-deaf, the layers disjointed, and the lace totally cheap. I really don't know what they were thinking. A common misconception about tailoring is that it primarily refers to suits, but it's actually about the construction of a garment as a whole and the use of underlinings to create an ideal fit. This is crucial not only for bespoke suits, but gowns, which is why I'm not quick to write off anyone who didn't wear some iteration of a blazer. Admittedly, most of these looks were average at best, except for Jenna Ortega, whose Balmain gown was made out of shiny silver rulers, a reference to the tool that tailors frequently use, which is brilliant if you ask me. And as a whole, I wish we'd seen a lot more references to the sewing process, like pattern pieces or chalk lines. Both Gigi Hadid and Sydney Sweeney wore custom Miu Miu gowns that reference the past, and while both are impeccably tailored, I still need them to have a good story. In Sydney's case, she was inspired by Kim Novak, whose short-lived relationship with Sammy Davis Jr. is the subject of a movie that Sydney will be starring in, directed by Coleman Domingo. Sammy Davis Jr. was an incredibly influential black dandy, but I think referencing him directly would have been way more interesting than his white girlfriend, especially considering Sydney is no doubt going to be wearing something similar whenever the movie comes out. As for Gigi, she recreated a look worn by Josephine Baker, which was designed by Zelda Wynne Valdez, who was one of the first black couturiers to be recognized nationwide. Since there are just a few more levels to Gigi's reference, I'll give her a better grade than Sydney. I'm also just a sucker for this sort of silhouette. It's very atonement. One thing that was sorely missing at this year's Met Gala was color, which is pretty ironic considering the theme of the exhibit. Now, since the actual dress code was tailoring for you, the priority was good tailoring, and I appreciate that the vast majority of attendees managed to do that. But after a certain point, all of their looks started to blend together. Almost every outfit was black or white, with the occasional dash of red here or there. But a big part of black dandyism is an emphasis on bright colors and bold patterns, not only as a rejection of conformity, but as a reference to traditional African patterns. My eyes were so starved of color at a certain point that anytime I did see something remotely colorful, I appreciated it regardless of its adherence to the theme. A lot of outfits at the Met Gala were constructed beautifully, but they wound up fading into the background because they looked so similar, and choosing a fun color could have been such an easy fix for that. This is probably the best Met Gala of the 2020s so far, even if it isn't in my top 5 of all time, and I respect that overall the evening was pretty cohesive. I think this high success rate has a lot to do with the dress code, which was specific enough for people to stay on theme while still being broad enough for people to be creative. That's what went wrong in 2023 and 2024, I think. In Honor of Carl was too specific, resulting in an endless wave of tweed and pearls and bows, while the Garden of Time was too vague, leading to a bunch of random flowers and metallics. Everyone usually cites the 2018 Met Gala as their favorite, with the exhibit being heavenly bodies, fashion, and the Catholic imagination, while the dress code was Sunday best. And that easy-to-follow combination gave people the perfect jumping-off point for their ethereal looks. With that in mind, I hope they continue this balance next year, because I was starting to lose faith for a minute there. There's been more discourse revolving around the Met Gala than usual, with some requesting for a boycott of the event, and the internet being full of comparisons to the Capitol in the Hunger Games. I myself have made the same joke offhandedly, but I do think it's important to understand that the Met Gala does serve an actual purpose, and it isn't just a way for the rich and famous to flaunt their wealth in our faces, even if it feels that way. Like many museums, the Met is funded in a variety of ways, including membership fees, retail products, private and public donations, and government grants, which amounts to roughly $500 million annually, with nearly half of that going towards employees' salaries. However, the Costume Institute, which is its own curatorial department with one of the largest collections of clothing and accessories in the world, isn't supported by the rest of the Metropolitan Museum. As a result, the Met Gala is their primary source of funding. In 2025, the Met Gala raised $31 million for the Costume Institute, the most to date. And while $75,000 seats, when most of us can't justify buying eggs, might seem out of touch, it doesn't make the event any less important, especially now. Time and time again, we've seen dictators come for the arts. Adolf Hitler did it, Francisco Franco did it, Mao Zedong did it, Pol Pot did it. And now Donald Trump is attempting to do it, following a disturbingly familiar pattern of restricting content, defunding art institutions, and harassing artists, all under the guise of making America great again. And while the theme of the exhibit was chosen ages ago, I think it's interesting that this year's Met Gala is a celebration of Black history and culture at the exact same time diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are being targeted. People love to act as though fashion is frivolous, even though clothing is something that each of us wears every single day. And I'd argue that there's no better way to document exactly what's happening culturally than with clothing. If you can understand the significance of Da Vinci's Mona Lisa or Van Gogh's Starry Night, then the 7 centuries worth of clothing in the Costume Institute deserves your respect as well. I mean, some of those dresses are older than the United States. What were your thoughts on the 2025 Met Gala? I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!